The sun was setting on a quiet suburban street, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It was the kind of evening where people rushed home, eager to escape the chill that crept in as the day faded. Amid the calm, a sleek black luxury car sat stranded on the side of the road, its hazard lights blinking like a distress signal to the world. Behind the wheel was Marcus Reynolds, a self-made millionaire known for his sharp business acumen and polished demeanor. Tonight, however, he wasn't the picture of power and control that the world admired. He was a man with a flat tire, no spare, and a dying phone battery. As Marcus stepped out of the car, frustration etched into his features. He scanned the area for help. The street was eerily quiet, and the thought of spending the night stranded weighed heavily on him. He was used to solving problems with the snap of his fingers, but this was different. Just as he was about to give up and walk to the nearest gas station, a voice called out, "Need some help, sir?" Marcus turned to see a young boy, no older than 13, standing a few feet away. His clothes were worn but clean, and his wide, curious eyes shone with sincerity. The boy's name was Jamal, and he carried an air of quiet determination that belied his age. He wasn't carrying a phone or any tools, just a school backpack slung over one shoulder and a basketball tucked under his arm. Marcus hesitated. Could this kid really help him? Jamal seemed to sense the doubt and added quickly, "I'm good with tires. My uncle taught me. Let me take a look." With no better options and time slipping away, Marcus nodded reluctantly. Jamal set down his basketball and got to work, his hand steady and sure as he examined the tire. He spoke in a calm, reassuring tone, explaining what he was doing step by step. It was clear he had done this before. As the minutes passed, Marcus found himself growing curious about the boy. What was he doing out here alone at this hour? He seemed resourceful and mature, qualities Marcus respected but rarely associated with someone so young. When Jamal finally stepped back and dusted off his hands, he looked up at Marcus with a proud smile. "It's not perfect, but you should be able to get to a shop now." Marcus was genuinely impressed. "Thank you," he said, reaching for his wallet. "Let me pay you for your time." But Jamal shook his head. "No need, sir. Just glad I could help." That simple response caught Marcus off guard. He wasn't used to acts of kindness without strings attached. As Jamal picked up his basketball and turned to leave, Marcus called out, "Wait, do you live around here? Can I give you a ride home?" Jamal hesitated, his eyes darting to the darkening sky. "I'm good, thanks. It's just a few blocks away." Something about Jamal's demeanor tugged at Marcus's heart. He felt compelled to know more about this boy who had appeared out of nowhere to help him. But before he could press further, Jamal smiled again, a smile that hinted at stories untold, and disappeared into the night. As Marcus drove away, his thoughts lingered on Jamal. There was something extraordinary about him, something that couldn't be ignored. Little did Marcus know, their paths were destined to cross again, and the next encounter would change both of their lives in ways neither could have imagined. The following morning, Marcus found himself unable to shake the thought of Jamal. It wasn't just the boy's quick thinking and skill with the tire, it was the way he carried himself, so sure and unbothered by the challenges life seemed to have thrown his way. Marcus, a man who prided himself on reading people, sensed there was more to Jamal than met the eye. It nagged at him like a puzzle missing a piece. At the office, Marcus struggled to focus. Calls, meetings, and emails came and went, but his thoughts kept drifting back to that quiet street and the boy with the basketball. He wondered if Jamal had made it home safely, where he lived, and what kind of life he had. Finally, unable to concentrate, Marcus decided to leave early. Something about this boy felt important, though he couldn't yet explain why. As he drove back to the same neighborhood where he'd met Jamal, Marcus couldn't help but notice the stark difference from his own world. The houses were smaller, many with peeling paint and overgrown yards. Kids played in the streets, their laughter echoing through the air, while adults sat on porches, their conversations muffled by the hum of passing cars. It was a community that buzzed with life, but one where opportunity felt scarce. He parked his car near a basketball court and stepped out, scanning the area. His heart skipped a beat when he spotted a familiar figure. Jamal was there, dribbling his basketball with practiced ease, his focus intense as he aimed for the hoop. A small group of kids watched from the sidelines, cheering him on. Marcus waited until Jamal scored, the ball swishing cleanly through the net before approaching. "That was a nice shot," he called out, his voice carrying over the court. Jamal turned, surprise flashing across his face. "Oh, hey sir, didn't expect to see you again." "Call me Marcus," he replied, smiling. "I just wanted to say thanks again for last night. You really saved me out there." Jamal shrugged modestly, tucking the basketball under his arm. "It was nothing. My uncle always says, if you can help someone, you should." Marcus nodded, intrigued. "Your uncle sounds like a wise man." Jamal's expression softened. "Yeah, he is. He looks after me and my little sister since my mom's not around anymore." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken pain. Marcus didn't press further, sensing it wasn't his place. Instead, he changed the subject. "You got some real talent on the court. Do you play for a team?" Jamal shook his head. "Nah, can't afford it. But I practice every day. My dream is to make it to the NBA someday, maybe buy a big house for my uncle and sister." There was again That quiet determination, so different from the flashy ambition Marcus was used to in his world. He felt a strange urge to help this boy, though he didn't yet know how. You got the drive, that's for sure. I bet you'll make it. Jamal grinned, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Thanks, Marcus. That means a lot. They talked for a while longer, Marcus learning bits and pieces about Jamal's life. He lived just a few blocks away in a small apartment with his uncle and younger sister Mia. His uncle worked long hours at a warehouse to make ends meet, and Jamal did his best to help out, balancing school, chores, and babysitting Mia when his uncle wasn't home. It was a lot for a kid his age, but Jamal spoke about it without a hint of self-pity. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Marcus decided it was time to leave. He offered Jamal a ride home, but the boy declined again, saying he liked to walk. Before parting ways, Marcus handed him a business card. If you ever need anything, give me a call, and I mean it. Jamal hesitated before taking the card, slipping it into his pocket with a quiet thanks. Driving away, Marcus felt a mix of emotions, admiration for Jamal's resilience, sadness for the hardships he faced, and a growing sense of responsibility. He couldn't explain it, but he felt like he was meant to cross paths with Jamal for a reason. Over the next few days, Marcus found himself returning to the neighborhood, hoping to catch another glimpse of Jamal. He told himself it was curiosity, but deep down, he knew it was more than that. He wanted to help, though he wasn't sure how to do so without overstepping. One evening, as he parked near the basketball court, he noticed Jamal sitting on the sidelines, his head bowed. His basketball lay forgotten at his feet. Marcus approached cautiously, his concern growing with each step. Jamal? Everything okay? The boy looked up, his eyes red and weary. For a moment he didn't respond, and Marcus wondered if he'd made a mistake by intruding. But then Jamal let out a shaky breath and said, "It's my uncle. He hurt his back at work and can't go in for a while. He's worried we won't be able to pay rent this month." Marcus' chest tightened. He could see the weight of the situation pressing down on Jamal, a burden far too heavy for someone his age. "I'm sorry to hear that," he said gently. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Jamal shook his head. "We'll figure it out. We always do." But Marcus wasn't convinced. He saw an opportunity to step in, to make a real difference in this boy's life, but he also knew he had to tread carefully. Jamal's pride and independence were part of what made him so remarkable, and Marcus didn't want to take that away. As he drove home that night, Marcus began to formulate a plan, one that would not only help Jamal and his family but also empower the boy to chase his dreams. He didn't have all the details yet, but one thing was clear. This was just the beginning of their story. The next day, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about Jamal's situation. His mind kept returning to the boy's quiet strength, his refusal to complain despite the challenges he faced. It stirred something in Marcus, a reminder of his own past. How he'd grown up in a working-class family, struggling to make ends meet before finding his way to success. He saw a reflection of himself in Jamal, and it pushed him to act. That evening, Marcus found himself parked outside a small grocery store near Jamal's neighborhood. He waited until he spotted the boy walking out, a small bag of essentials in one hand and a determined look on his face. Marcus rolled down the window and called out, "Jamal, got a minute?" Jamal stopped, surprised to see Marcus again, but walked over to the car. "Hey, Marcus, what are you doing here?" "I was just passing through," Marcus lied, though his intentions were clear. "Wanted to check in on you and see how things are going." Jamal gave a half-hearted shrug. "Same as always. My uncle's still out of work, but he's tough. He'll get through it." There it was again, that stubborn resilience. Marcus admired it, but he also felt the weight of the boy's situation more deeply now. "Listen," Marcus began cautiously, "I've been thinking about what you told me. I know you don't like asking for help, but maybe there's a way I can support you without stepping on your toes." Jamal raised an eyebrow, curious but skeptical. "What do you mean?" "Well," Marcus said, "I own a few businesses around town, and I'm always looking for good people to help out. Maybe your uncle could do some light office work while he recovers. Nothing too physical, just enough to keep things steady for you guys." Jamal hesitated, clearly torn. He didn't want to seem ungrateful, but the idea of accepting charity, even in the form of a job, made him uneasy. "I don't know, Marcus. I'd have to ask him. He's not big on handouts." "It's not a handout," Marcus assured him. "It's a real job, and he'd be earning every penny. Plus, it could give you some breathing room. You'd have more time for school, basketball, and, being a kid." Jamal seemed to consider this, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "I'll talk to him," he said finally, "but no promises." "Fair enough," Marcus replied, relieved. "Just let me know." As Jamal walked away, Marcus felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't a solution to all their problems, but it was a step in the right direction. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to uncover, more challenges lurking beneath the surface. Meanwhile, back at Jamal's apartment, things were tense. His uncle, Terrence, was a proud man who had spent years working hard to provide for Jamal and Mia. The injury had hit him hard, not just physically but emotionally. He felt like he was failing his family, and the stress was taking its toll. When Jamal brought up Marcus' offer later that night, Terrence was initially resistant. I don't need charity, he said firmly, wincing as he shifted in his chair. It's not charity, Uncle T, Jamal argued. It's a job. Marcus said it's just office work, nothing heavy. And it's only until you're back on your feet. Terrence sighed, his expression softening as he looked at Jamal. He knew the boy was trying to help, and deep down, he appreciated it. I'll think about it, he said finally, though his pride still wrestled with the idea. The following week, Marcus followed through on his promise, arranging a part-time position for Terrence at one of his companies. The work was simple but meaningful, and it gave Terrence a renewed sense of purpose. Slowly, the family began to regain some stability, but the challenges were far from over. As Marcus spent more time around Jamal and his family, he began to see the cracks in their world, the sacrifices, the struggles, and the dreams that felt just out of reach. He also noticed something else. Jamal's talent on the basketball court was more than just raw potential. The boy had a natural gift, and Marcus was determined to help him realize it. One day, Marcus showed up at the court with a surprise. He carried a brand new basketball and a pair of sneakers in Jamal's size. Figured you could use some proper gear, he said, handing them over. Jamal's eyes widened, but he hesitated to take the gifts. Marcus, I can't. You can, Marcus interrupted. Consider it an investment. One day, when you're playing in the NBA, you can pay me back. Jamal laughed, the sound light and genuine. All right, he said, finally accepting the gifts. But don't think this means you can beat me one-on-one. The two spent the next hour on the court, playing a spirited game that drew a small crowd of neighborhood kids. For the first time in a while, Jamal felt like a regular teenager, free from worries, if only for a little while. But as the days turned into weeks, Marcus began to notice subtle signs that not everything was improving. Jamal seemed distracted at times, his usual energy dimmed. When Marcus pressed him, the boy brushed it off, insisting he was fine. But Marcus wasn't convinced. One evening, while driving Jamal home from the court, Marcus decided to dig deeper. You know you can talk to me, right? If something's bothering you. Jamal stared out the window, his jaw tight. It's just everything. School's hard, May has been sick a lot, and even with my uncle working, we're barely scraping by. I don't know how much more we can take. The raw honesty in Jamal's voice hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He realized that no matter how much he tried to help, the boy was still carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders, and that weight was threatening to crush him. Marcus clenched the steering wheel, his mind racing. He needed to do more. But how? He couldn't simply throw money at the problem. That wasn't what Jamal or his family needed. They needed something bigger, something lasting. As he dropped Jamal off and watched him disappear into the apartment, Marcus made a silent vow. He didn't know exactly how yet, but he was going to change Jamal's life for the better, for good. Over the next few weeks, Marcus found himself more invested in Jamal's life than ever. He started visiting the neighborhood more often, finding small ways to help without making it too obvious. Whether it was buying groceries for Terrence under the guise of a company perk or slipping a little extra cash into Mia's school supplies, Marcus did what he could. But the more time he spent around Jamal and his family, the more he realized just how fragile their situation was. One evening, Marcus arrived at the basketball court to find Jamal sitting alone on the bench. His basketball was on the ground, untouched, and he looked lost in thought. Marcus approached quietly, sitting down next to him. You've been quiet lately, he said. What's on your mind? Jamal hesitated, then let out a deep sigh. It's my sister, Mia. She's been coughing a lot, and the doctor said she might have asthma. But the medication's expensive, and Uncle T's been working double shifts just to keep the lights on. I don't know how we're going to afford it. Marcus felt a pang of helplessness. He had grown to care deeply for this family, and hearing the weight Jamal carried in his voice was almost unbearable. Jamal, you know I'm here for you, right? Whatever you need. Jamal nodded, but didn't look at Marcus. I know. It's just, I don't want to keep depending on you. You've already done so much. I need to figure out a way to help my family on my own. Marcus admired the boy's determination, but he also worried it might lead him down a dangerous path. Jamal was smart and resourceful, but desperation had a way of clouding judgment. Marcus decided to tread carefully. You're not alone in this, he said gently. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let people help. Jamal didn't respond, but Marcus could see the conflict in his eyes. He wanted to believe it, but the pressure to provide for his family was overwhelming. A few days later, Marcus received a call from Terrence. His voice was laced with concern. Marcus, I don't know if Jamal's mentioned it, but he's been spending a lot of time with some older kids in the neighborhood. I don't like it. They're trouble. I've told him to stay away, but you know how stubborn he can be. Marcus' chest tightened. He had noticed Jamal's recent distance but hadn't realized how serious it was. I'll talk to him, he promised. Thanks for letting me know. Later that evening, Marcus found Jamal at the basketball court again, but this time he wasn't alone. A group of older boys stood around him, their voices low and intense. Marcus recognized the type instantly, street smart, hardened by life, and always looking for the next hustle. He approached cautiously, calling out, Jamal, can I talk to you for a second? The older boys exchanged glances, sizing Marcus up before walking away. but not without a lingering air of menace. Jamal looked uncomfortable, caught between two worlds. "What's up, Marcus?" Marcus gestured for him to sit. "What's going on, Jamal? Those guys, are they your friends?" Jamal hesitated, then shook his head. "Not really. They just said they could help me make some money." Marcus's stomach dropped. "How, Jamal? What kind of help are we talking about?" Jamal avoided his gaze, but his silence spoke volumes. Marcus leaned in, his voice firm but calm. "Listen to me, Jamal. I know you're trying to help your family, but that's not the way. Those guys, they'll chew you up and spit you out the second it benefits them. Whatever they're offering, it's not worth it." Jamal looked down at his hands, his voice barely above a whisper. "What else am I supposed to do, Marcus? I can't just sit around while my family struggles." "You don't have to," Marcus said, his tone softening, "but there are better ways. You're smart, Jamal. You've got talent and potential. You can make something of yourself without risking everything." For a moment, Jamal seemed to consider Marcus's words, but then his jaw tightened, and he stood abruptly. "You don't get it, Marcus. You don't know what it's like to feel this kind of pressure." Marcus watched him walk away, frustration and worry gnawing at him. He did understand, more than Jamal realized, but convincing the boy that was another matter. As the days passed, Marcus noticed Jamal becoming more withdrawn, his once bright energy dulled by the weight of his circumstances. One evening Terrence called again, this time sounding frantic. "Marcus, Jamal didn't come home tonight. I've been calling his friends, but no one's seen him. I don't know what to do." Marcus's heart raced. He immediately thought of the older boys from the court and the dangerous path Jamal might have wandered down. "I'll find him," he said firmly. "Don't worry." He spent the next several hours driving through the neighborhood, stopping at every place he thought Jamal might be. The basketball court was empty, the streets eerily quiet. Just as he was about to lose hope, he spotted a familiar figure near an abandoned warehouse, huddled with the same group of boys. Marcus parked his car and approached quickly, his pulse pounding. "Jamal," he called out, his voice cutting through the night. The older boys turned, their expressions hardening as they saw Marcus. One of them stepped forward, his tone sharp. "You lost, man?" Marcus ignored him, focusing solely on Jamal. "Come on, kid. Let's go." Jamal hesitated, caught between the safety Marcus offered and the pull of the group around him. The tension was palpable, the air thick with unspoken threats. Marcus stood his ground, his voice steady. "This isn't you, Jamal. You're better than this." For a long moment, no one moved. Then slowly, Jamal stepped forward, leaving the group behind. Marcus put a protective arm around his shoulder and led him away, the stares of the older boys burning into their backs. As they drove away, neither spoke for a while. Finally, Jamal broke the silence, his voice trembling. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I didn't know what else to do." Marcus glanced at him, his expression a mix of relief and determination. "We'll figure it out together, Jamal, but you've got to trust me, okay? No more of this." Jamal nodded, tears brimming in his eyes. For the first time, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to carry the weight of the world alone. But the challenges ahead were far from over, and Marcus knew the toughest decisions were still to come. As the car rolled through the quiet streets, Marcus's mind was racing. He had managed to pull Jamal out of a dangerous situation tonight, but the fear lingered. What if he hadn't been there? What if Jamal had gone further down that road, making choices that could never be undone? The weight of that thought was crushing. He glanced over at Jamal, who sat slumped in the passenger seat, his face etched with guilt and exhaustion. Marcus knew this wasn't over. The boy's struggle wasn't just about money. It was about survival, pride, and the crushing weight of responsibility he carried every day. They pulled up to Jamal's apartment, and as Marcus killed the engine, he turned to face him. "Jamal," he began, his voice firm but kind. "I know things are hard right now, but you've got to promise me no more of this. Those guys don't care about you. They'll use you and leave you with nothing." Jamal nodded, his eyes glassy. "I promise," he said softly, "I won't go back." Marcus wanted to believe him, but the hesitation in Jamal's voice told him the battle wasn't won yet. As Jamal stepped out of the car and walked into the dimly lit building, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was brewing. He sat there for a moment, staring at the worn-out structure, before finally driving away. The next morning, Marcus woke to an urgent call from Terrence. His voice was panicked, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Marcus, it's Mia. She collapsed this morning. I called an ambulance. She's at County General." Marcus' chest tightened. "I'm on my way," he said, grabbing his keys and heading out the door. At the hospital, Marcus found Terrence pacing the hallway outside Mia's room. The man looked more defeated than ever, his usually strong demeanor crumbling under the weight of fear. "The doctors are running tests," he explained, his voice strained. "They think it's her asthma, but they're not sure. She's so small, Marcus. I don't know if she can handle this." Marcus put a reassuring hand on Terrence's shoulder. "She's tough, just like her brother and uncle. She'll pull through." Inside the room, Mia lay on a hospital bed, her tiny frame hooked up to machines that beeped steadily. Jamal sat by her side, holding her hand and whispering softly to her. When he saw Marcus, he stood, his face a mix of worry and guilt. "This is my fault," Jamal said quietly. "If I'd worked harder, made more money, maybe we could have gotten her better medicine." Marcus crouched to meet Jamal's eyes. "None of this is your fault," he said firmly. "Mia's sick, and that's not something you can control. What matters now is that she gets the care she needs." Jamal nodded, but Marcus could see the guilt lingering. It was a weight the boy wouldn't let go of easily. The doctor soon confirmed that Mia's condition was serious. She would need specialized treatment, and the cost would be steep. Terrence looked like he'd been punched in the gut when he heard the numbers, and Jamal's face turned pale. "I'll figure something out," Terrence said, though it was clear he had no idea how. Later that evening, Marcus sat alone in his office, going over everything that had happened. He couldn't shake the image of Maya in the hospital bed or the helpless look on Jamal's face. He had resources, connections, and influence. He could do something. But how could he help without making Jamal feel like a charity case? And how could he ensure it was a lasting solution, not just a temporary fix? As he sat there, an idea began to form. It was bold and risky, but it could be the answer they needed. He picked up his phone and made a few calls, setting a plan into motion. The next day, Marcus met Jamal at the basketball court. The boy looked tired, his usual spark dimmed by worry. Marcus handed him an envelope. "What's this?" Jamal asked, frowning. "Open it," Marcus said simply. Inside was a flyer for a local basketball tournament, along with a note. "I pulled some strings," Marcus explained. "The tournament has a cash prize for the winner. It's enough to cover Mia's medical bills and then some." Jamal's eyes widened as he read the flyer. "Marcus, I can't." "You can," Marcus interrupted. "You're one of the best players I've ever seen, Jamal. This is your chance to do something incredible for yourself and for your family." Jamal hesitated, doubt flickering in his eyes. "What if I lose? What if I'm not good enough?" Marcus put a hand on his shoulder. "You are good enough. But this isn't just about the tournament. It's about showing yourself what you're capable of. You got everything you need to succeed, Jamal. You just have to believe it." Jamal nodded slowly, the determination in his eyes beginning to return. He agreed to enter the tournament, and over the next week, Marcus helped him train. They spent hours on the court, Marcus pushing Jamal to his limits, reminding him that success wasn't just about talent, it was about heart and perseverance. But as the tournament approached, Marcus began to notice signs that the older boys Jamal had been involved with weren't done with him. A few of them started showing up at the court, watching from a distance, their presence a quiet but constant reminder of the trouble Jamal had narrowly escaped. Marcus warned him to stay focused, but he couldn't shake the feeling that their involvement wasn't over. The night before the tournament, Marcus received an anonymous call. The voice on the other end was low and threatening. "You think you can swoop in and save the day? Stay out of this, or you'll regret it." Marcus' grip tightened on the phone, his anger flaring. "Leave the kid alone," he said, his voice steady. "He's not part of whatever game you're playing." The line went dead, but the message was clear. Jamal's fight wasn't just on the court, and now Marcus knew the stakes were higher than ever. The day of the tournament arrived, and the gym buzzed with energy. Players warmed up on the court, sneakers squeaking against polished wood, while the crowd filled the bleachers, chattering with excitement. Jamal stood off to the side, his new sneakers laced tightly, and the basketball Marcus had given him tucked under one arm. His eyes scanned the crowd, searching for familiar faces. He spotted Marcus near the front row, nodding at him with an encouraging smile. Beside him sat Terrence, who had taken a rare day off to be there, and Mia, bundled in a blanket but smiling brightly. The whistle blew, and the first game began. Jamal's team wasn't the biggest or the flashiest, but they played with heart, moving with precision and determination. Jamal was their anchor, darting across the court with unmatched speed, sinking shot after shot with an ease that silenced any doubts about his talent. By the time they made it to the final game, the crowd was firmly on their side, chanting Jamal's name with every point. But as the final match approached, Marcus noticed something unsettling. At the far end of the gym, the same older boys who had been circling Jamal before were now standing in a group, their eyes locked on him. One of them, a tall guy with a cold, calculating stare, nodded subtly in Jamal's direction. Marcus's stomach turned. He had hoped they'd stay away, but it was clear they hadn't given up. The final game began, and it was a battle from the start. The opposing team was strong and well coordinated, and for the first time, Jamal looked rattled. Marcus could see the doubt creeping in, the weight of the stakes pressing down on him. But then, in a moment of clarity, Jamal glanced toward the stands. He saw Maya, her little hands clasped tightly as she cheered him on, and Terrence, shouting words of encouragement. Finally, his eyes met Marcus's, and something clicked. He straightened his shoulders, his resolve hardening. Jamal played like a man possessed. He stole passes, nailed three-pointers, and hustled harder than anyone else on the court. With less than a minute left on the clock, the score was tied. The tension in the gym was palpable as the ball landed in Jamal's hands. The crowd seemed to hold its breath as he dribbled past two defenders, leaped into the air, and released the ball. The gym erupted as it sailed cleanly through the net just as the buzzer sounded. His team swarmed him, lifting him onto their shoulders as the crowd went wild. Marcus couldn't contain his grin as he watched Jamal soak in the moment, his face glowing with pride. The announcer declared their team the champions, and Jamal was handed the grand prize, a check large enough to cover Mia's medical bills and give his family a cushion they so desperately needed. But just as the celebration reached its peak, the older boys made their move. Marcus saw them heading toward Jamal, their expressions dark and menacing. Without thinking, Marcus pushed through the crowd, reaching Jamal just as one of the boys grabbed his arm. "You owe us," the tall one said, his voice low and dangerous. "We had a deal." Jamal froze, his triumphant smile fading. Marcus stepped between them, his tone firm. "He doesn't owe you anything. Leave him alone." The boy sneered, his grip tightening on Jamal. "Stay out of this, old man." Before Marcus could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. "Let him go." Everyone turned to see Terrence stepping forward, his expression calm but unyielding. The boy hesitated, clearly thrown off by the unexpected intervention. "You heard me," Terrence said, his voice steady. "Walk away." For a moment, it seemed like a fight might break out, but then the boy released Jamal's arm, muttering something under his breath before motioning for his friends to follow him out. The tension broke, and Jamal let out a shaky breath, looking at Terrence with a mix of gratitude and surprise. "Thanks, Uncle T," he said quietly. Terrence nodded, placing a hand on his nephew's shoulder. "You don't need them, Jamal. You got everything you need right here." As the crowd began to disperse, Marcus pulled Jamal aside. "You did it, kid," he said, his voice full of pride. "Not just the game. You proved to yourself what you're capable of. Don't ever forget that." Jamal smiled, the weight that had been on his shoulders finally lifting. "I couldn't have done it without you, Marcus. Thank you for everything." But just as they were leaving, Marcus received a text from an unknown number. It read, "You won this time, but it's not over." He frowned, his protective instincts kicking in. He didn't want to worry Jamal or his family, so he kept it to himself for now. But as he watched Jamal laughing with Mia and Terrence, Marcus knew one thing for sure. He'd do whatever it took to keep them safe. This was their moment, and no one was going to take it away from them. The ride home from the tournament was quiet, but it wasn't the heavy silence of uncertainty or fear. It was the kind of quiet that came with relief, the kind that followed a long battle finally won. Jamal sat in the passenger seat, the check folded neatly in his lap, his fingers brushing over the edges like he was afraid it might disappear. Marcus glanced at him and couldn't help but smile. The boy had grown so much in such a short time, and tonight, he'd proven to himself and everyone else that he was capable of extraordinary things. When they arrived at the apartment, Terrence and Mia were waiting outside, their faces glowing with pride. Maya ran up to Jamal, her small arms wrapping tightly around his waist. "You were amazing, Jamal," she squealed, her voice filled with pure joy. Terrence stepped forward, his hand extended to Marcus. "Thank you," he said sincerely, "for everything you've done for my family. I don't think we could have gotten through this without you." Marcus shook his hand, his grip firm. "You don't need to thank me. Jamal and you, both of you, have done more for yourselves than I ever could. I just gave a little push." Inside the apartment, they gathered around the small kitchen table, the check placed in the center like a symbol of their collective victory. For the first time in a long while, the atmosphere wasn't heavy with worry. Instead, there was a quiet hope, a belief that things might finally be looking up. Terrence leaned back in his chair, exhaling deeply. "With this, we can get Mia the treatment she needs and maybe catch up on the bills," he said, his voice tinged with both relief and gratitude. Jamal looked over at Marcus. "And you know what else?" he said, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. "I think I owe you a game of one-on-one. You've been talking a lot about your skills, but I haven't seen them yet." Marcus laughed, the sound genuine and full. "You're on, kid. But don't cry when I beat you." The moment was lighthearted, but beneath it was something deeper, a sense of family, of connection. Marcus had started this journey as a stranger, but now he felt like he was part of something bigger. Jamal and his family had taught him as much as he taught them. Over the next few weeks, life began to settle into a new rhythm. Mia started her treatment, and the improvement in her health was almost immediate. Her laughter filled the apartment again, a sound that Terrence said he hadn't heard in months. Terrence himself seemed lighter, more at ease, now that he wasn't constantly worrying about how to make ends meet. And Jamal? He threw himself into basketball with a renewed passion, spending hours on the court honing his skills. Marcus continued to check in regularly, though he made a conscious effort to step back and let the family find their own footing. He had no doubt they could handle it. Still, he stayed in the background, always ready to help if they needed him. One afternoon, Marcus received a call from a college basketball scout he'd contacted after the tournament. The scout had seen Jamal play and was impressed, not just by his skills but by his heart and determination. "He's got potential," the scout said. "With the right guidance, he could go far." Marcus hung up the phone, his heart swelling with pride. He drove to the court where he knew Jamal would be and watched from a distance as the boy practiced. Each shot he took, each move he made, was filled with purpose. Marcus walked over, clapping his hands to get Jamal's attention. "Hey kid," he said, grinning. "Got a minute?" Jamal jogged over, wiping sweat from his forehead. "What's up?" I just got off the phone with a scout, Marcus said casually, watching as Jamal's eyes widened. He's interested in seeing you play again. Think you're up for it? Jamal's jaw dropped, and for a moment, he was too stunned to speak. Then a wide smile spread across his face. Are you serious? This is huge. It's just the beginning, Marcus said, clapping a hand on his shoulder. But yeah, it's huge. The following weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Marcus helped Jamal refine his game, balancing his natural talent with the discipline needed to take it to the next level. When the day of the tryout came, Jamal stepped onto the court with the same determination he'd shown at the tournament. He gave it everything he had, and when it was over, the scout pulled Marcus aside. He's got it, the scout said simply. We'd love to offer him a scholarship. When Marcus delivered the news to Jamal and his family, the apartment erupted in cheers. It wasn't just about basketball, it was about the doors this opportunity would open, the future it promised. For Jamal, it meant a chance to chase his dream. For Terrence and Mia, it meant hope. As the weeks turned into months, Marcus watched from the sidelines as Jamal's life began to change. He excelled on the court, but more importantly, he grew into a young man who understood the value of hard work, perseverance, and kindness. He never forgot where he came from, always finding time to mentor younger kids in the neighborhood and remind them that they, too, could rise above their circumstances. One day, as Marcus sat in the stands at one of Jamal's college games, he felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to see Terrence and Mia, both beaming with pride. You did good, Terrence said, his voice thick with emotion. Marcus shook his head, his gaze fixed on Jamal as he sank a perfect three-pointer. No, he said softly, he did good. The journey hadn't been easy, and there had been moments when the odds felt insurmountable. But in the end, Jamal's story wasn't just about overcoming adversity, it was about the power of community, of people coming together to lift each other up. It was a reminder that sometimes all it takes is one act of kindness to set a life on a new path. As the final buzzer sounded and the crowd erupted in cheers, Marcus leaned back in his seat, a sense of peace washing over him. He hadn't just helped Jamal had helped him too, reminding him of the importance of second chances and the power of believing in someone when they couldn't yet believe in themselves. It was a lesson Marcus would carry with him forever, and as he watched Jamal celebrate on the court, he knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning of an incredible story.